So to usher in the winter solstice, I took advantage of 2020's charitable VOD selection and saw Fatman, directed by Esham and Ian Nelms and starring Mel Gibson, Walter Goggins, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, and a heavily compressed Ben Shapiro. And it was not the Christmas movie I asked for this year, but very well the one I needed. We open upon an opulent, snowbound home where a prissy little rich boy named Billy covets the best-in-show ribbons which adorn his school uniform. Billy's desk is backgrounded by a monolithic painting of Napoleon, leaving amusingly little ambiguity as to his personality. We then cut to Kris Kringle taking target practice on a fence line of Santa-branded products somewhere in Alaska. Mrs. Claus, aka Ruth, arrives in short order, and the two discuss anxiety over their imminent delivery prospects. Elsewhere in the city, one man pawns a baseball bat to another for a modest sum, but this is no ordinary bat, for a plaque on its handle reads, "Made in Santa's Workshop." Meanwhile, Billy's science fair project netted him only a lowly runner-up award. That night, the pawnbroker is creeping through a dark house when his phone rumbles. It wasn't on silence, but his gun was. He's a hitman. And after he ices the homeowners, he takes the call, to be informed that Billy has a job for him, scaring the classmate who bested him into surrendering her first-place prize. Back north, Santa slouches down at a bar. For all his power, he's still struggling on the dole. Turns out the Clauses have a contract with the government where they get paid based on how many presents they deliver. But unfortunately, more and more people just deserve to be on the naughty list. Sure enough, after Santa makes his rounds, Billy awakens to discover a lump of coal beneath his lavish tree. Thus slighted, he shakes his fist at the sky and calls the hitman back for a new contract.
I'd like you to kill Santa Claus.
And from there, it becomes a tale of the fat man trying to make ends meet by teaming up with the US military, while a relentless killer with a grudge draws ever closer to canceling Christmas for good. The shadow of IRL transgressions looms large over any Gibson project, but all things considered, he's well cast as a grizzled, bitter old Saint Nick who's handy with a pistol. It sounds one note, a beloved mythological figure stuffed into the sad dad mold of Logan and such, but years of directorial left turns and uncomfortable comedies haven't diminished the fact that this man can capital A act. Gibson totally sells a Santa who wants to believe in the sanctity of his mission, but is as beaten down as any of us by financial woes and what he hears on the news. He's cynical, but it doesn't stay that way, even if his path to revitalization is less than sunshiny. Meanwhile, Goggins' hitman, who we'll come to know as Jonathan Miller, has a personal reason to hunt Santa on top of a paycheck. Vengeance for years of no gifts beyond a puny toy car. It adds a touch of depth to his character, but also more questions than if he was a blank slate. So are there people who Santa just doesn't give anything to, coal or otherwise? What dictates that? In any event, Goggins is ultimately your typical cold-blooded killer character, and nary a scene passes where he doesn't menace a screenmate or steal something to further his ends. With the snowy setting, it could come across as a screen test for the next season of Fargo, but the irreverent yet insightful spirit of a Coen Brothers picture is sorely missing in Fatman. A few moments along Goggins' quest, such as him infiltrating a post office and torturing a guy to figure out where letters to Santa go, kinda hit different in an era where people chasing lunatic fringe theories all too frequently harass or harm innocent people. Nevertheless, the way in which he inspects and catalogs elf-made gifts as if they're supernatural artifacts, and the conspiracy collage of documents and blurry Santa photos decorating his walls, are the kind of delightfully silly extensions of the Santa mythos which I've always wanted to see explored with a straight face. To that end, the idea that Santa delivers some presents while his holiday spirit stimulates the rest of the economy is an inspired twist which adds a relative dose of credibility to the function of a modern Santa, as does him grousing about being undercut by sweatshops and outsourcing. Still, the film certainly isn't concerned with realism. Santa acknowledges this isn't the first time someone's been out for his head, which I guess explains why he's practicing shooting when we first see him and later laying into a punching bag. But since it already implies a world where Santa's existence is undisputed, you have to imagine he'd be moving between safe houses on the regular to avoid both raving fans and zealots. Regardless, all that really seems to lift Santa's spirits is not, say, the sweet words of a child who believes in him, but a bigger paycheck after he agrees to go into business as a government contractor. The notion is darkly funny when introduced, but when this seems to be the new status quo as the credits roll, it feels like the lump of coal at the story's heart never really warms into a diamond worth admiring. Christmas movies don't need to be feel-good from reel to reel. Even It's a Wonderful Life has a man contemplating suicide. But the film just doesn't carry itself with the sardonic tone necessary to make some incisive commentary about capitalism. Santa's initially choked up about selling out to the military-industrial complex, but the elves never seem especially broken up about it, and in the end it's unclear if and how continuing to do this will improve the factory's actual present output. That change is apparently assigned to Santa's closing decision to be more proactive about dealing with naughtiness, which does give the film a satisfying final scene. A moment where Mrs. Claus has him look at some old letters to remind him of how his giving has inspired kids is sweet, but it'd be nice if his character arc was more clearly tied to something besides Billy, as it's not apparent what else compelled him to go a step beyond cold delivery besides some basic business strategy. Design-wise, there are touches of color and homage to classic Santa. Chris drives a bright red Ford pickup, and a plate of Mrs. Claus's delicious-looking cookies are never off-screen for long. But Fatman can't commit to an aesthetic at some intersection of grim and campy like Gremlins, Strange Exports, or Krampus. It wants to make drab mundanity part of the po-faced gag, but between the direction and production, the most it stylistically flirts with are touches like pale-faced elves and Santa having subtle super strength and a healing factor. A scene where a captain grills an elf on the viability of their junk food diet feels like it's seeking a punchline it never finds. And while the violence throughout befits its R rating, it's never gruesome or creative enough to merit any grindhouse cred. Indeed, don't go in expecting any especially clever or high-concept action scenes. This isn't a throwaway project like, say, the Seagal tier slop that Bruce Willis cranks out for the bargain bin, but by no means is it a holly jolly John Wick. Most of Goggins' kills take place off-screen, and any appreciable action doesn't kick in until the third act when he lays siege to the elves' workshop. The climatic showdown between him and Santa teases some badassery, but it ultimately amounts to a rote shootout enlivened only by the winter setting and the fact that, well, Santa Claus is dual-wielding. Notably, Gibson-Santa has never shown either riding a sleigh or delivering presents, not even to the petty punk that sets the story's events in motion. A few reindeer appear for a name check, but they never leave their stable. It's a budgetary decision, no doubt, but also probably a conscious choice to not waste time inviting untenable comparisons to countless other Christmas films. There's also only room for one right-wing actor to play a crabby live-action Santa. Some stray thoughts. The hitman has a pet hamster, which I know just fulfills the killer with a weird soft spot trope, but darn is that thing cute in its little wheel. Goggins orders roast duck at a Chinese restaurant, which marks the first time someone has chosen to eat this dish in a Christmas film. There's a scene where Santa appears to be calling Elon Musk, which is sensible, given the man's track record of helping bright red vehicles get airborne. Santa also has a desk drawer full of those hand exerciser things, as he apparently wears them out with sufficient regularity. I guess this is just a sight gag about him being stressed out, but I kept thinking it must have something to do with Santa in particular. I'm not sure what. So he has super strength, and naturally that would translate to his grip. But is it also he's especially strong from clutching the reins of a sleigh, or? Goggins constructs a concealed spring blade for his arsenal, and while it's likely an attempt to just spice up the final fight with some melee combat, it got me thinking about the untapped potential of Assassin's Creed North Pole. The aforementioned scene where Santa's going at it with a punching bag takes place after Christmas, so this very well could be in celebration of Boxing Day. Billy passes the time waiting for updates from Goggins by painting Santa being annihilated in various settings. He and Little Kid Grinch from the Jim Carrey movie should really open up a gallery together. Real talk. Mel Gibson's not even that fat in this. Now, Russell Crowe as Santa, on the other hand. We learned that elves know how to disassemble a bomb, so I fully expect one of them to join Tom Cruise's squad in the next Mission Impossible. Goggins says he hates Santa because he only ever got one gift, quote, after all the times that I wrote you, which I guess makes him a Santa stan. Santa with an eye patch is a dead ringer for Odin. They're both godlike figures associated with snowy lands, I guess. And this would also make an excellent double feature with Mel Gibson's other Christmas movie. Overall, I'd give this film a 5.5 out of 10. It applies copious, gritty, old badass tropes to Père Noël, but also gives Mel room to work his undeniably potent dramatic chops, while still having just enough of a sense of humor to let its more absurd beats fly. Still, a brighter color palette and a more focused tone would have helped it stand out. It's not comedic so much as just goofy. As it stands, Lethal Weapon remains the superior Mel Gibson Christmas action movie. Ordinarily, this would be where I'd offer a word of caution about seeing this film in a theater, but this time, there's no need. Not only are theaters closed in Washington until at least early January, which means I may need to make a pilgrimage to the nearest drive-in to catch Wonder Woman 1984, but Fatman did receive a VOD release. It's not my preferred way of seeing a new film, but it's not the first time, and I know it won't be the last. On one hand, it allowed me to kick back with a pizza and a few drinks by a roaring fire, and at least on the PS4, it was cheaper than a ticket. On the other hand, that literal and figurative glow of the big screen, escapism projected large in a hushed chamber, it's a privilege I'm anxious to support the dismissal of. Granted, I'm waxing poetic right now about seeing Mel Gibson play Santa Claus, but the sentiment stands. If I could have one Christmas wish granted, it'd be that all goes well with the vaccine and other public health measures rolling out, and people can make resolutions that aren't just stay indoors and afford to do so. While you're in there though, happy viewing and Happy New Year. I'll see you in 2021.